All right. Good morning or good afternoon. And thank you for joining this conversation about making the case, how we design materials for our stewardship campaigns that show our impact and that help people understand our message and our mission. Really glad that you're a part of this call today. My name is Davey Gerhard, and I am the Executive Director of TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. I do this ministry from my home in San Francisco, California, where I'm also a member of diocesan staff on the Diocese of California. I am the canon for stewardship, if you could imagine such a thing. So thank you all for being here today. We're going to go over a few things in our conversation today. We're going to talk like what is a case for support and why do we need to develop one, or why should we think about one when it comes to our stewardship and our messaging. We're going to talk a little bit about generational differences in donor engagement. If you were a part of April's webinar, we went all into detail on generational differences. So this is going to be just a 5-slide review of that work, but it's important to know that we have different approaches for different generations in our congregations. We want to make sure that we can talk about that and make some sense of it. So we'll be doing just a little review work on the different generations, how they receive information. Then we're going to talk about the craft and the art of putting together your case for support. What goes into it? What should you be collecting? And then at the end, how do you wrap it all into a document that is shareable and that tells your story? So those are the things that we'll learn today, and many other things as you bring up your questions and talk about what's happening in your congregation. So a case for support is a concept that comes to us from the business community or from our nonprofit siblings who have taught us that before you go out and pitch an idea, you need to spend the time and energy creating what that message looks like, creating the case for support. It's really important for us to be able to say why we are raising money, what we are doing with that, and why you should be joining us in that work. So this is a tool or a message, a model for communicating message and ministry and mission to our members. We want them to feel involved and included, and at the end of the day, to help make that argument or that case for why they are supporting the congregation with their gifts. So it tells our stories. Storytelling, we're going to talk a lot about storytelling in today's conversation. Telling stories is the way we communicate our passion and our personal attachment to the mission, and also gives us opportunity to tell those stories of impact. We're going to talk a lot about how we connect our members to our mission and vision. My goal, I should say, is that every member knows that their money, every dollar goes to ministry. Their money is going for mission. Their money and their meaning are combined and integrated, and that this is an important gospel spiritual process for us. It also is there to build our commitment to our goals. So our case for support talks about the aspirational aspects, talks about where we're trying to go, and fills in the information for folks to figure out how we're getting there. So how do you even start? And I want to start even before how we start this work by saying, whatever you come up with in your congregation as you engage stewardship, it's important to know that we need to rethink our materials every once in a while. If we haven't thought strategically about what our brochure, if you have a visitor card or a brochure at the front of your church, or if you develop specific materials for your stewardship campaign, if you haven't thought through putting them into a theme or connecting them in the through line or what they're saying about you and your community, then it's time to do some strategic work about that so that your message as a community is in alignment. Do you have a mission statement? Do you have a particular vision for how your community engages its work? It's really important for you to be able to put that into your messaging and get it into all your materials. I know that sometimes we develop materials over years and we order like 5,000 copies of the brochure and then it sits around for a long time. And the kids whose pictures are on it have graduated and gone to college. And it's now time for us to really rethink these materials. So from time to time, re-engage this process. It starts with a strategic plan or some sort of visioning process with your stewardship committee, your vestry, your clergy leadership. If you have a strategic plan that your church is using, maybe you're 2 years into your 5-year plan or whatever, what are the goals of that? Where does it start? What information was gathered as a part of that? That can be a starting point for your materials in stewardship. Talk about what ministries you offer. And we often skip some of the important ministries that our church is doing. If we just think about our outreach or the big visible programs we have, we forget that there are lots of ways that we do in-reach as well. Our pastoral care, our affinity groups, maybe like a college age group that meets, or your seniors that gather together every once in a while. Maybe you have an EFM group or a Stevens ministry group or something like that that meets and forms its own cohort. Those are ministries that are equally important to talk about as well. So what goals do we have for our outreach and our in-reach? Whenever we talk about creating materials or doing our messaging, I think we need to talk about the measurable impact that our ministries have on community. And this is important because it shows our community and it shows our members that their gifts really matter, that they are doing great work in the world. So we'll spend some time later today talking specifically about impact and how we create that. Finally, you want your case to describe that future state, the place that your ministry needs to get to or that you want to arrive at. It should certainly describe a little bit of what's happened and gone into it. But if you're spending more time in your brochure talking about the past than you are about the future, you're missing some really important points on how we communicate our vision and what we're talking about here. Impact is, as I said, really important because it motivates us. I think it is wonderful to talk about your food ministry or your tutoring program or your senior outreach. It is even better to talk about how many meals you provide or how many kids are educated or get the help that they need. And even better, if you have some statistics, the kids that go through our tutoring program, there were 50 of them last year, and 4 of them or 20 of them elevated their grade point average or brought home report cards that they were proud of, or whatever you want to say. So talk about the mission and the impact of those ministries that you're doing. In your in-reach, talk about, we have this many potlucks, or we have this many people meeting in small groups, doing Bible studies or whatever. Help people realize that lots and lots of energy and folks are involved in your community and that the work has an impact. Whatever you're doing, your case then becomes your talking points for the pledge campaign. And I'll spend some time today and in future sessions talking about talking points, why we need to develop that elevator pitch or those concise ideas that we have for what our church is doing and why we need your engagement in helping it. We're going to talk today a little bit about some of the ways that we go about our case statement. And I see often in churches where we develop ideas or materials and we get them approved by the vestry or whatever committee has to sign off on them. And then they are out in the world. We print them up or we send them out in email, and it's great. And maybe we've forgotten to take that step in testing. Testing your message before you create the final is really important. And I know it adds some time to your timeline. Maybe you needed to have your brochure done last week, but if you take yet those extra few days or that extra week to ask people in your congregation who you trust to take a look at it, to see how they receive the message, give you feedback, it's really important. Test it on a small sample. Maybe not your leadership, but maybe people who are, are regular members, I should say, the folks who are in the pews, and make sure that they represent the congregation in all of its diversity. Ask them, does this messaging mean anything to you? What are we missing? What were we leaving out? What could we strengthen? Does this section make sense to you? Whatever you're saying, help them help you in testing that and giving you really feedback. And then build the time in to refine it. Take their feedback. Don't just ask for it and not do anything with it, but make some changes based on what you've been told. The testing is really important. Don't forget that stuff. So I realize that we don't have time, budget, energy to create multiple versions of our case statement or our materials, but you might create add-ons, a slip of paper that can go into your brochure or into a packet based on different groups or members or demographics that are available in your church. For example, newcomer packets should have a little bit of the history. They should have a little bit about how we do church, our governance structure, our funding structure, what's an average or median gift size look like, why we create budgets the way we do. And and also here are all the ministries that you can get involved with. So your newcomers might need a nuance to your case to make it make sense to them, to draw that line between you're new here and here's what we're asking of you. We're going to talk in a moment about how different generations are impacted by messaging and maybe what they need to hear and how we might approach different members of our congregation in different ways. This is something that we get from our nonprofit siblings. The idea that we should be donor-centric, that one message doesn't apply to all, that we should take time to think before we pick up the phone and ask someone to join us in making a gift to this year's campaign. Who are they and where do they come from and what's their experience been? And using those things that we know about them to enter that conversation in the right way so that we're making it possible for them to make their best gift. It's also really good to note if you apply for outside funding, either from the diocese or maybe another grant program that's out there. The Episcopal Church offers grants, or maybe there are some community foundations that are supporting some of your programs. It's great to list those as community partners, as other funding partners, because it adds more legitimacy to the work you're doing. It says, look, lots of other people support us too. We get money from lots of ways. It's not just on our shoulders to fund our church. We're going out there and doing lots of things, and we're attracting attention and investment in our ministry because of that. And also, if you get any corporate or local businesses that support you, I know big box retail, for as many problems as it has, it also, they have a deep community, they have a deep need to do some local community investment, and they often give very small grants, $1,500, $500 a year. Your grocery chain, your big box store, your big retailers, they might have a little bit of that community money available and they give it out. So what's 500 or 1,500 or $2,000 to your church? Maybe it's not a big splash in your budget, but maybe it's some necessary funding for the youth program to be able to do something great, or whatever. So put those, excuse me, put those corporate or community funders also in your case, because it helps us remember that our money comes from lots of places, lots of people support us. If you were in our April session, we spent 90 minutes talking about generational differences and how they impact donor motivation. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that today, but this is just to review, because one of the things that is really important for us to know is that thanks to modern medicine and thanks to longevity and the way we live healthier lives, we have a lot of generations that are active and making gifts in our church right now. 5 distinct generations who are active and able to make gifts of time, talent, and treasure to our communities. And we have another generation that's just coming up, a 6th, who very soon will be starting that, right now they're in godly play, but soon they're going to be in those places where they're getting involved in community groups or doing their confirmation and needing to get involved in service projects. So we're creating yet a 6th generation of people who are going to start being active in how they share their gifts. So how we communicate with different generations matters, because they don't all receive information or act on it in the same way because of some of the cultural moments through which they have lived and the way they have been. So we're going to talk a little bit about this. Our nonprofit siblings have been working on this issue for decades, trying to narrow down what are the ways to communicate, and they've passed a lot of learning on that churches can take too. These are going to be very general statements, so none of them is absolute, but let's take a look at some of this. And we'll start with our oldest group, sometimes called the greatest generation, our mature folks born before 1945. Of people who go to church, in this demographic, 60% of them make donations and 51% of them volunteer. This comes from a pre-pandemic study from the Lake Institute of Faith and Giving. We're waiting to see what the 2023 study, they're redoing that study because life has changed. We've had a whole pandemic. But we're going to see new numbers next year from that. But looking at it now, this is really important to see that this age group, they're the steadfast donors of our churches, and they are showing up still to volunteer, and they're anchors, bedrock in a lot of our communities. They trust institution. The institution has been there for them. They've been raised with the idea that you support the community with your gifts, and the institution asks and you respond to that. So that in general, that message is very related. This group is really interested, of course, in pastoral care. They might be receiving a lot of it, and they might be giving a lot of it because they have decades of wisdom and love that they want to share with other members. This is a great group of folks to be a part of a pastoral care team or other kinds of ministries that are about relationship and listening and loving. The church has been there for them and their families, and they want it to be there for future generations. They want their grandkids and their great grandkids to come to church, or for the church to be there when they need them to be there. Uh, this generation is probably making gifts from their retirement assets. They're probably not in the workforce anymore. And so they're probably making gifts from their retirement. So their annual giving might not be growing year to year. It might actually have gone down from what it might have been when they were in their highest earning years in their careers. But they're still making gifts from their assets. Because they're giving out of their assets, this group can make great capital campaign gifts. They're likely the ones who will sign up when the roof needs repairing or when you need to do something big. They will make a pledge because they're giving out of their appreciated stock or their other assets. And of course, you should be in conversation with these folks about their end of life decisions, about planned gifts, about their estate, and seeing what role the church can play in helping them create tools and models that give them lifetime income streams and also provide a gift to the church when they pass, or can involve their inheritance, their children in those giving decisions as well. So there are lots of ways. Your diocesan folks have planned giving folks that they can recommend to you, or you can always communicate with TENS and we can do what we can to provide some resources, but planned giving, really important in this generation. Let's talk a little bit about our boomers, those born between 1946 and 1964. So what we saw in the previous generation, a lot of donor and volunteer impact. It moves down a little with this generation. They're a little less churched, a little less, which isn't to say less committed, but they have their commitment in a different way. So 48% of baby boomers are making gifts to their church, and 49% of them volunteer with their church. It's an interesting inverse. We're going to see that continue as our generations get younger. This generation has seen a little bit of the early scandals in politics. They remember things like Watergate. They remember some of the scandals in churches across the nation, not just the Episcopal Church. And so maybe they're a little skeptical. Maybe they want to see the finances before they decide on how they're going to give. These members might have some questions to ask. So we should be providing materials that answer some questions for them. They might be early in their retirement, or they might just be finishing their income producing career years. Whatever they are, they're probably making some robust annual gifts, but that might be maxed out from what they have been. Definitely, this group should be involved in capital gifts and in planned gifts. This is the wealthiest generation ever to have lived, and they're going to pass on an enormous amount of money to their heirs and to the institutions that support them. And our churches should be talking with them about how they would like to support their ministry in their giving and in their estate. Let's talk about my generation, the Gen Xers, those born between 65 and 76. So look at these dismal statistics about donation. Not many of us give to church. That we're the smallest generation out there. We're sandwiched between two huge ones, the boomers and the millennials. The Gen X is a tiny generation. And even so, we're not really pulling our weight in making donations to the church, but we volunteer pretty heavily. This is interesting because you'll get Gen Xers to show up and work in your outreach. show up to church to do things, but maybe they're not making the best gift that they could be. They're not trusting of the institution. This is part of the reason why they're not making some of the best gifts. They might be giving more to their school or to their favorite charities than they are to their church because they've seen how the church or other institutions, excuse me, have messed up and taken their money and maybe not spent it on the priorities that they wanted. And so they're a little frustrated about that. So establish trust. Make certain that you know that they know where the money is coming from and how it's being spent in your church so that they can see for themselves that you're transparent, that you're good stewards of the gifts, that you're doing impactful things with the gifts that you're receiving and creating ministry in the world. This generation is going to inherit a whole lot of money from their parents and grandparents in the coming decade. This is really important for us to know because what they do with that wealth, um, it, you know, it, we need to be having conversations with them about some wealth planning. And I know that there are lots of models out there for it. Churches might bring in an outside speaker or do a course. There are lots of them that are very spiritual based and not so prosperity based. And there are lots of good tools out there that we could recommend. This is a really important thing to talk about because wealth can also be a burden, right? And we want people who are about to inherit great wealth to feel good about what they can do with those gifts and how they can support their church. This generation is in its prime career mode, and so they're making some of the best incomes that they'll ever make. So their annual giving should be nice and strong and solid, should be going up every year. If you're noticing in your stewardship trends that this generation isn't giving, they're just giving the same gift year after year, then we need to have a conversation with them. Really honest. Did you get a cost of living increase this year? You know, our churches need a cost of living increase too. And how can you participate more? Did you get a promotion? Are you now vice president? Are you leading a team? Do you have more income? Are your children now off to college? And so maybe you're an empty nester and you now have more means to supply, to give to the church. This is an opportunity for them to increase their giving. And of course, they're making capital gifts because they have lots of appreciated assets, stock options, things like that, that they get through their career, that they can turn into beautiful gifts to the church and make wonderful and get some tax-wise advantage to giving appreciated assets to the church. Our millennials, they're born between 77 and 95. So even a smaller number donate to church and some volunteer. You're gonna see with our millennials and our Gen Z folks that volunteerism is the way into church. It's where they will start their relationship often before they come for a Sunday. They might show up to your Saturday activity, your ministry in the community. It might be brought along with a friend. It's really important to show how our mission comes from our gospel, how our gospel is tied to our faith and our values, and that we're just living these values, the ones that they see on Saturday afternoon when they show up to the beach cleanup or the tutoring program or the Habitat for Humanity build or whatever they're going to see that that comes from our faith. Then they'll be curious and perhaps come on a Sunday and be invited in. Results really matter. So they don't just want to give money that goes into funding a budget. They want to give money that sees results, that is changing the world. This generation has been brought up thinking that they should be changing the world. And they are very generous. Well, they might be early in their careers or just starting to get that second and third job where they're getting promotions and things are going well. They might be starting families, so they might not have a lot of money to give to the church, but they are making strong gifts. They're very generous. 89% of this generation is donating to other nonprofits. That's important to note. They might not be giving huge gifts, but they are giving. It's instilled in them to make gifts to nonprofits. Finally, let's talk about our Gen Zs, those born in 96 and forward. Um, I love this statistic that by 20% or 20 years old, 30% of them have made a donation to a nonprofit. When I was 20, I was in college, I was not making gifts to nonprofits. And this is because technology has made it so easy to put something on their phone. You know, it's my birthday, I'm doing a fundraiser for my favorite charity. Will you give $5? And people do it. They make these gifts instantly on their phones all the time. So they're already making donations. 97% of this generation has used their phone or their computer to make an online gift for a charitable purpose. That's big. So if they're not making gifts yet to our church, because we're not asking them or expecting them to participate, we need to give them their way in. But in doing that, I want to caution us and say this generation and the millennials who precede them may never fill out pledge paperwork. It's just maybe not how they're going to operate. They might give gifts, they might do it on online ways. They'll slide that little toggle over that says make my gift monthly or every 2 weeks or whatever, but they're unlikely to fill out pledge paperwork. It's a thing. This generation also doesn't have checkbooks, they don't carry cash, they use their phone for everything, right? So we've got to start meeting them where they are in making giving possible so that we can help them make their best gifts. This generation is really going to be generous when we give them the opportunity to do it. They care about the planet, they care about what's happening to the world. And if the church isn't talking about local community and how it needs to step in and help what's happening, then they're missing a message for this generation. They've been raised with that bumper sticker, think globally, act locally, and they know it. It means something to them. So give them the opportunity in your church to be both global and local, to participate and make their gifts. Final thoughts on appealing to the late Gen Xers, the millennials, and the Gen Zs. Results are really important. So tell those stories. How are your gifts making impact? Focus on retention. We want them to make giving a discipline. It's something that we do out of our theological understanding, that our gratitude makes us generous. Our gratitude for all that we've received, for the abundance of creation, and for the joy of our community allows us to be generous and make gifts into the world. And that it's something that we ask for a renewal all the time. Volunteerism is key to these younger members. They will come in the doors through the work rather than through the message first. And that's really important. For older generations, myself included, I came into church because I wanted to hear more, be a part of a community. That mattered to me. Younger generations care what the work is happening, care about the work that's happening, and that will be the beacon that guides them in. So think about how we're talking about what our churches do in the community, what they do for each other. This emotional involvement makes disciples, and that's a really important thing too, because we need to understand that our spirituality, our path, is all wrapped up in how we relate to community and how we relate to the world. And so discipleship is yet another part, a gift that the church can offer to these younger members. Be a part of something big, be a part of a message that goes beyond ourselves, that digs deep into community and branches out in beautiful ways. So let's talk a little bit about what goes into a case. And I'm going to go into detail on all five of these points. We're going to talk a little bit about our history, talk a little bit about our mission. You need to have some elements of what services you offer the community. You need to put into a case statement how members can get involved, and and be clear about how you plan to change the world. We're going to go into detail now on each of these. So, your organizational history is really important. How was your church founded? What are the stories that you can gather about why your church is where it is? How far back does it go? Who was involved in doing it? In a lot of churches, especially out here on the West Coast, where our communities are hundreds of years newer than some of your communities on the East Coast, you can look at the names on the stained glass window and they match up with some of the names on the streets of the founding people of the towns. This is because a lot of these towns and institutions grew up together. And so it's helpful to know who was there? Why did this church get created? What's it named for? How was that particular patron saint chosen? Was it the day that it was founded, or was it the message that that saint embodied that was important to the founders? How did that happen? Why did they pick Saint Ambrose or Saint Albans or the Holy Innocents, which is my church? It's a pretty gruesome story to tell and found a church on, but it was important to us, and so at some point in 1890, that was where we went. Find out those stories. Why are you in this neighborhood? So there might be a church in another neighborhood just down the street. Why are there two churches there? Was there ever a need? Was it that we had so many Episcopalians? Was it that this community was made up of this kind of immigrant population and a different in another one? Where did we come from? Why did we plant churches the way we did? Are there stories that we can tell? Was there a merger somewhere in the past where communities decided to get together and use one building instead of two? And finally, I think it's really cool to know who's been in your church. Have there been civic leaders, mayors and vice mayors and city council people that go to your church? Are there people who have gone on to found businesses that are either important in their local community or in the national scene? Who are inventors and community members? Episcopalians are fascinating people and they're involved in a lot of industries. So dig deep into your story. Who are the people that went to your church, who made it up, and might be historically interesting? We need to be able to describe in our materials who we're serving, who our neighbors are. We're going to need to be able to talk about that because that's the impact of our mission. So, what kind of neighborhood or community is your church located in? What is happening there? Is it a neighborhood that's on the rise? Is one where the industry has moved out? Is it recreating itself right now? Is it made up of hardworking people, or is it folks, like who's there? So know your neighbors, and be able to describe how you serve them. Who are the people served by your ministries? So again, this is where we start talking about numbers and stories. When you go, bring those stories back into your community, put them into your paperwork, your brochure. Tell why we do what we do and how it matters. Do you have other community groups that you support? A lot of congregations see more people throughout the week in and out of their buildings because they rent their space to community organizations than perhaps they do on a Sunday, right? So our churches serve as community hubs as well. A couple of years ago, a consulting group called Partners for Sacred Spaces put together a study that they called the economic halo effect of churches. And they did a nationwide study, survey, and determined that for every temple, mosque, church, and synagogue in America, it contributed $1.3 million worth of service to its local community. That's an average number, which takes into account mega churches and tiny congregations across all faiths, really, in America. So it's a really broad study. But what it tells us is that just by being where you are, just by being on your street, you're providing service. When you provide space for communities to meet, perhaps it's just having a light on an otherwise dark street that makes people feel safer, that makes your neighbors come out. Maybe it's the way they walk their dogs through your garden, or they invite other people in. There is ministry happening whether your doors are open or closed because your church exists. Know that. That's part of the reason why we invest in our churches, is because the community needs them to be there, whether they're members or not, whether they believe or not, whether they're a part of our particular way of being. Our churches matter. So know that it's a part of our case as well. What do your neighbors need from you? So one way we talk about our neighbors is how we serve them. Another is engaging our neighbors and finding out what they need from us. Every time my church does a new strategic plan, we do them maybe every 5 to 7 years. We figure out that it's time to do one. We're about to engage that process again because we just have a new priest starting next Sunday. But we walk the neighborhood. We've been doing this now, it'll be our 4th time since I've been a member in 25 years, where we go out in groups and we walk the neighborhood that our church is located in, and we take note. Who do we see on the sidewalk? What businesses do we see? What services are being provided? What is missing? We see lots of preschools, but we don't see any adult retirement facilities. What does that tell us about the neighborhood? We see lots of strollers, and we see lots of people walking dogs. What does that tell us about our neighborhood? We see lots of food pantries. We see lots of yoga studios. What is it that happens in our community that we can take note of? Because all of those are then ministry opportunities we can bring back. And in fact, we saw that there were a lot of yoga studios. We saw that some of them were very expensive. We started offering like community yoga nights on Tuesdays. People would bring their yoga pad and we would pay an instructor to come and do this great group, and people were loving it. And it was really low cost for people to be able to do because we had no overhead. We were using our own space to do it, right? So things like that can help us pay attention to the neighbors and see what they need us to do, the kinds of ministry that we can create, how we can help them grow. It's really important in your case that you have evidence of good stewardship, that you show that you are transparent and accountable, and that your leadership is on board. So things I look for in a church: can I see their budget? Is it on their website? Is it on a bulletin board in the parish hall? Do I have any access to it after the annual meeting? I like to see that they have really clear goals for what they're raising money for and what it's going for. I like to know that there's a place where I can go see the vestry minutes. Is there a website? Are they putting them in an archive somewhere? Does everybody know how to access them? Are your vestry meetings open to the public? This is another way that we can say there's transparency in our community. We can always close a vestry meeting with an executive session if there's something sensitive to talk about and not put it into the minutes. But other than that, our members should understand how our representational government functions and how we do what we do in church. It matters, even if we're just talking about, sweeping the sidewalk or whatever. These things that come up matter to our community. And if there's something going on in your church or in your community, maybe there was a problem, or maybe there was a shakeup, or maybe there was a ministry that fell out and you need to rebuild it, name that. Talk about, we have goals to restart our ministry program. As I mentioned, my church is looking for, or has found, a new priest, but we were looking for that. And our profile, you know, through the pandemic, a lot of our profile in describing who we were was aspirational. We're rebuilding our outreach right now because it was really diminished in the pandemic. Or, you know, our children's program took a little bit of a hit, and this is where we hope to go. So it's okay to put aspirational things into your case. We are rebuilding, we are doing things, we are changing and growing. It's really good to know that we have goals, because this says our church is here now, but we're really focused on the future. So how can you be a part of that? How can you be a part of what's happening? We're trying to grow our people, grow our ministry, grow our budget, strengthening what's already good. If there are predictable future events, like, you know, the industry, the major employer in your town is about to shut, or housing, your community is really housing dependent and things are going crazy in the mortgage crisis, something like that, right? Future predictable events. How can we begin to think forward about those things and prepare for them so that we can serve our members and talk about that in our communities? You know, we're putting some money aside because we know we're going to have to help some members with medical debt, or whatever it is. You know, be able to pay attention to what's going on in your local community so that you can be there to help them. Make it easy to give. I have seen countless stewardship brochures, letters, through my many decades of this ministry. People share with me what they did, and sometimes they forget the most obvious, which is to say, this is how you can make a gift. So make certain that there's an explicit way that you're communicating in your materials that people can make their gift that you've just asked them to make. Do you have an online giving platform? Is there a mobile device? Do you have little pew cards that people can make a gift right there in church? Or is it in your bulletin? Where's your pledge form? Is it only paper, or do you have an online version of that? How do people access that? And make sure that you have lots of ways for people to make cash gifts or other gifts. So, you know, you can sign us up on your bill pay with your bank, and that check goes out every 2 weeks or whatever frequency you want. And you don't have to write that check. Your bank just sends it to us automatically. Or remind them that they can give their appreciated stock, give through securities or other things like that, that the church is capable of taking those kinds of donations. If they are living from retirement assets, they get a required minimum distribution, money that they have to take out of their retirement account every year once they pass the age of 70 and a half. So let them know that it's okay to make gifts directly from their retirement accounts, or grants from their donor advised fund, or things like that. Finally, always include options for planned giving, even if it's just to say, would you like more information about it? Have you left the gift? Have you left the church in your estate? Let people have an opportunity. Again, plant that seed that planned giving is an option out there. Don't forget to include time and talent intentions along with treasure. If you download this year's pledge card from the 2023 stewardship materials, you'll see that on one side, it's about your financial gift. And then on the flip side, it's about what ministries would you like to be involved in? What would you like more information on? List the things that you're already doing so that we can recognize you for it. It's a reminder that we give from our wealth, our works, and our wisdom, we just don't need your money. We need all of you. My good friend, Greg Rickel, the recently retired Bishop of Olympia, says, forget the tithe, forget all of that. Stewardship is 100%. Stewardship asks of you everything that you have to give to the church. We're all in for the message of the gospel. Our living, our families, our work, our giving, it's all in line with who we see Jesus to be and how we want the church to be in the world. Stewardship is a full-time ministry and a full-time expectation. Now we're going to finish up our conversation here before we get into your questions about how you put all this together, because this is really important. You've collected all this great stories, you've collected the history, you have all these future statements, you know where you want to go, and you've created a document that's massive. So now you have to make it into something that can really fit into, a couple of pages so that people can read it and absorb it and understand it. That's a trifold brochure, if it's the front and back of a page, or if it's a booklet that you make, get it down, edit it, and then edit it again, and then give it to someone who's really good at writing marketing copy or ad copy in your church, and say, how do I edit this further? How do I, highlight the right messages? How do I make sure that my message is getting out there? And don't forget that first step of test it. After you've created it, test it and make sure that it works. Remember that your ask should be specific. Will you join me in making a gift? Will you join us in making a gift for these ministries? This is what we're doing. If you ask something generally, you're going to get a very general response. So be specific and ask for what you need. Pictures are really important because they convey emotion. They can say a lot. It really does make sense. A picture is worth 1,000 words because it conveys much more than just the photo. So use pictures when you can. Make sure you get the appropriate permissions, especially if kids are involved, and especially if you're going to put it on a website. But it's really important to have pictures of your members doing things in your church or in community or serving or whatever it is, because then we can see ourselves. When we see other people doing it, we see ourselves in that ministry as well. Tell stories. Please tell stories. They are so compelling. When somebody stands up and gives their testimonial about why they participate in church or why they make a gift, it is so interesting to me, and I pay attention to that because these are people I trust or respect or live in community with, and so I really want to know that. So thank you for that. Phoebe has put into the chat that our church's greatest in and outreach is Sunday morning liturgy. We're looking for ways to make our greatest gift part of the case statement. Yes, I have some things to say about that. I bet other folks do too. Often Sunday it's the day, right? It's the day when we're all there. It's the focus. We spend a lot of time, effort, energy, money making Sunday happen, keeping our buildings up, paying our clergy, getting the choir. Lots goes into Sunday. So it's our big splash. It's where we get fed and nurtured. It's where we learn. It's where we form community. It's where we become loving and vulnerable with each other. And so you should definitely, in your case, talk about how strong your community is, how much you love each other, the kinds of ways that you gather together, but make it approachable, right? Sometimes even this symbol I made, I interlocked my fingers. And the problem with that is that it doesn't allow for any newcomers, right? So our circle has to be a little open there so that people can come in and expand it, right? So sometimes when we get talking too much about the precious gem that our church is and how beautiful it is, we forget that we need to be open to how other people will come in and change our church and give us new traditions and new ways of thinking. So definitely, that's one way that I think about maximizing the impact of Sunday. It's also where so much of our pastoral work happens on Sundays. I bet there's more out there, and we'll talk about it as we come back to our questions. We're almost at the end of the session. Make sure you get your case out there. If it's in paper, great. Make a PDF of it as well, so that it can be emailed or put on a website, downloaded, shared. And I'd like to challenge everyone in the congregation to be able to develop their own pitch, their own conversation about what matters to them. I support this church because of these things. And that's different for me, and it's different for you, and it's different for our neighbors. So develop your own way in and be able to talk about it, articulate it, practice that message out. The elevator pitch comes from that idea that you have like 8 floors or 11 seconds in an elevator with someone to share your great idea and get them to believe in it. We might not need to develop it quite that short of a pitch, but you should be able to articulate succinctly what happens, why it matters, what you're doing. Create a few other things in your stewardship documents. One of them, make sure you have a budget along with that brochure. People can see where the money is coming from. Make sure you have those pledge cards. Consider a narrative budget. And TENS has a tool in our resource library, which you can download, which helps you change that Excel budget into a narrative budget. What a narrative budget does, if you've never experienced one, is it takes those fixed costs, those hugest parts of our church budgets, which are salary, building, utilities, insurance, and it spreads them across our ministry areas. It might take 40% of your clergy's time to do worship and music. It might take 10% to do outreach, 20% to do children, youth, and family work. So you divide up those fixed costs into the buckets of ministry. And then what you're presenting is all of our money is going to mission. All of our money is going to ministry. It's the same numbers you see in the Excel spreadsheet of your budget, but it's presented in a way that helps us feel, deeply impacted feel, that our money is going to helping the world and changing the world. So I like to talk about where our money comes from and how our money is spent in a narrative budget as well. Make sure pie charts are really helpful. Excel is great at taking your numbers, and if you use that chart function, spitting out a pie chart so that you can share it's just a visual on how we get our money and how we spend our money. That's what I'll leave you with. This is my little my fun test to see if you can get your message onto something that fits on a 3x5 card. If your whole case can fit on this, you know that you are telling a good story, you've got what it takes, and you can expand from there. I call this a palm card because you can put it in your hand, you can hand it out to someone, and you can be at like an event where you can still hold your glass of lemonade or your plate of food and still have something to hand out or put in your pocket when you're done. They're easy little cards to show, this is what we raise money for. This is what we do. And so you'll notice in this case, in this fictional St. Swithin's in Blue Hill, what's important is that they're serving, they're educating, they're gathering, they're providing, they're planting. And this church does so much, and they talk about the impact that they have on the community, and then they talk about how you can be a part of it, how you can give. So with pictures and a few words and some links, this church has created a really simplified case statement and been able to communicate that. Might not be the only piece you do. You might need that trifold as well, or a longer piece. But this is a really great exercise, if nothing else, to say, how do I talk about my church and what we do in the world? I want to leave you with this, that the materials for TENS this year are ready to go. They're on the website, ready for you to download. Our theme this year is called Rooted in Abundance, and it shows in the ways that in community, family, personal experience, we dig deep and we spread out from there with abundance. And so the stories that we tell, the images that we use are all about that nurturing love of community and then how we're inspired to share our giving. We have for you pledge cards, sample letters that you can send. We have prayers of the people for your stewardship season. We have prayers for in-gathering and post-communion prayer and the offertory. We have seasonal reflections, so you can tie into the big themes of the church year. And we also have weekly reflections, and this can go in your bulletin during your campaign. We do it from the September through November Sundays. So they're one sheet, 300-word reflections that take a theme of our stewardship campaign and give a few reflection questions. So they can be used as sermon prep. They can be used in an adult ed forum or a rector's forum, small group conversations to have some stewardship conversation going on. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and in the time we have left, take on the questions that you might have. So let's hear them. Kristen is asking, oh, show the example of the 3x5 card slide again. Yeah, I can do that. I have to get, whoops, sorry, I have to get it back. Hold on. That's what I get for closing my slide too early. Oops, oh darn it. Look what I did. There we go. You'll get this slide also. I'll send it to you in the materials. So it's, legitimate. I spaced it out. It's the front and back of a 3x5 card. I hope you use this exercise. It really works. And it's a great way if you're doing like a party to kick off your stewardship, or if you want to have some materials at the back of the church, it's a great way to do it. Mike asks, do I have any experience using mail and envelopes? So I'm going to stop sharing, go back into our room now. I don't have a supplier of the mail-in envelopes. I think they can be useful. We used to, in the Episcopal Church, give out those weekly envelopes. You picked up your box with your pledge number on it at stewardship time. And I think, the more people have gotten away from check writing or even weekly attendance, let's just be frank, those envelopes kind of went away. But I think that when you're doing a pledge campaign, and if you're sending a letter and you're sending out a stewardship packet to everyone, including a response device, a envelope that they can use, makes sense. I don't have a supplier in mind, but you can usually get them printed with your church address and your logo on them pretty inexpensively from your local print shop. And if you're going to use them for multiple years, you can get a discount if you do it in bulk, and it And if your church name isn't going to change anytime soon, or your address, you can use these for quite a while. But I like it. I always like giving a way for people to make the gift easily. So give them the online way, give them the form, give them the envelope to send it in, and make some sense of it. Let's see. Marie says, one thing to note, a company in our town contributed to the building of a wheelchair ramp for us, but do not want us to let it be known because they do not want to be approached by many others in the community. Understood. So that's why we have in churches the ability to give anonymously. And so respect the donor wishes. Always go back to the donor and say, if they give something special like this, can we talk about this? How would you like this to be shared? If it's an unusual gift, like something specific for this versus like your annual pledge or whatever, always go back to them and say, can we talk about this, or would you rather not have your name shared? So in this case, it's just great to say, we had a community organization fund our accessible ramp. And that shows people, oh, there are other ways to get things funded. The community cares, and you don't have to mention the name, but you can still talk about the good work that happened. So yes, always go back to your donor and respect their wishes. Deb asks, is it appropriate to create email pledge card along with a letter mailed with a form? Yeah, I'll share my own church's website and our giving page. We just do it as an online form on our giving, and then you'll see we have last year's stewardship still up because we haven't opened it up for this year yet. There's Little Holy Innocents Episcopal Church in Noe Valley, California. So we have a form right there. You fill it out, you click submit, and it sends your form in. We have paper copies as well. So in that email that we send at pledge time, we include the link to this page, and we say, go in and fill out your pledge form and tell us how you'd like to make your gift this year. And if you don't like any of those, then we have a paper pledge form. We're happy to give that to you too. So always do it in both ways. Your website, whoever manages your website, there's probably the ability to create what's called a contact form or a field form. It's usually a very simple process because volunteers are doing this, and so they make it easy on us. So ask your website person how to do that. I did share so Marilyn, I'll put the website also in my materials that I send you, but you can go right into the chat and click on Holy Innocents and see how we do it. Phoebe is mentioning, with the growing giving patterns of our churches online, the giving in the plate was a way of engaging people in generosity as a part of worship. Oh, great question, Phoebe. I love this. So the manual act, the spiritual discipline of putting something in the plate is really important to us. We have a reaction to that and a desire to do it. And when we make it online or when the bank sends the check, we lose a little connection with making the gift, right? Because it's just something that happens with the click of a button. So again, in my church, I can tell you how we do it, and I've seen this used in lots of churches. We laminated a little card, sort of looks like a bookmark, and it sits in the pew rack with the hymnals and the visitor cards. And it says, if you're new to the community or if you're visiting and you'd like to make a gift, there's a QR code. QR means quick read, and you hold your phone camera up to it, and it opens up a website on your phone, which for us goes right to that giving page, and you can make a gift to the church. So if you're visiting and the plate is coming by, you can quickly make a gift to the church. And then you can put this little bookmark into the plate and say, I've made a gift. Or if your giving is recurring online or your bank check and you never put anything in the plate because it comes to the church automatically, you can put that bookmark in as a reminder that you've made a gift. And then I always ask our clergy to acknowledge the gifts, not just that are in the plate, but the ones that have been received this week electronically as well. And it's another reminder that people give in lots of ways, and that they get the blessing. The plate should contain their pledges as well. And we should bless them all on Sunday and give them over to God like we do with the things that come to our altar before communion. So there are lots of ways to do that. And I think it's really, really important. We don't want to lose that ability to give something when it matters. But, cash is harder to come by these days. If I came into your church next Sunday as a visitor and the plate came by and I didn't have a way to make a gift online, you'd get very little from me. And I would be ashamed to show you my dusty $1 bill or whatever's left in my wallet, because I don't carry cash. I use my phone or my debit card for almost everything that I do. And this is a growing trend. We don't leave the house with cash anymore when we go to church. And so the church needs to figure that one out. And lots of them are, but our churches need to be even better about it, because we're losing money if we don't. Thanks for that question, Phoebe. Phoebe, while we're talking, I also want to express my condolences at the loss of Frank. What a gift to the church, and what a gift you are to the church. We're so sorry to see that. So thank you for your witness and for being here with us today. You are much loved in the church.
Thank you, Davey. That means a lot. It also means a lot to be here now with everyone. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Okay, moving on. That was beautiful, Phoebe. Thank you. We'll love having you here. Mike asks, do we have resources available that can be used to educate the membership about legacy, giving, and age forms? Yes. Let's see. We have a webinar that you can view and download, which talks about legacy giving. What I don't have yet is a document. Maybe that's something for me to work on this summer. A document that talks about health directives and how to put those together. I can pull that together. It won't happen right away, but we'll do that at TENS and put that on our website as well. It's work that our diocese does. I go often to congregations and do sort of end of life. It sounds great. Join Davey to talk about end of life. But we talk about health directives and will writing and planned gifts and how to prepare for this thing that's going to happen to all of us, and how we make gifts for the church and make space for that in our own lives. And so we don't have documents on TENS available for that, but I bet your diocese has some work already done on that. The Episcopal Church Foundation has some work on that, and if you go to their website, but I think it's something TENS should develop as well. So thanks for the kick. What other questions do you have, either about how we make and market our case or about stewardship in general? Yeah, Helen, come on off mute.
Are you saying we should be passing the plate? Because I think we stopped in COVID, and I thought somebody said, no, the diocese has not said we can do that anymore. So the plate is on a little pedestal at the back, and we just hope. And people do put money in it. I myself make a bank, and I do this with my rent and all other kinds of things, and am a hearty fan of my Visa card and all of that. It's very easy to do.
Yeah.
And you do get a receipt, you get an acknowledgement. But my question is, should we start passing the plate? Or what?
Yeah, so I'm not going to wade into your diocesan policies. If your diocese is still and I know many of our churches, when we first reopened after the pandemic and were able to meet in person again, we didn't pass the plate just because, why put something that everybody's touching together? Some communities have relaxed that. Some dioceses have changed policies. So I would check in with your diocesan folks yet to see, and also then your community, right? So if you all like the stationary plate and it lives where it does and people are now expecting it, and maybe your visitors, they can be reminded of it. You can put it in a bulletin or maybe they'll just see it and know what to do with it. But I wouldn't suggest changing it if your community is comfortable with it, and especially not if your diocese isn't ready to relax that rule yet. And for a lot of congregations, they are passing the plate again, and that's an important ritual for a lot of us in the church. So go local, ask your diocese for advice on what they are recommending, and then ask your congregation, are we all right without passing the plate? If everybody feels good about it, but if some people are feeling like, I really miss it because I miss the action of it coming by and feeling a part of that moment. So it's a chance to have a communication about it.
Well, I think there is something spiritually wonderful about lifting that plate at the altar.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's kind of, it speaks to me, and I wonder if that isn't a stewardship opportunity that we've given up.
Oh yeah.
You hear, the wine and the bread and all of it up.
Yeah. I think it's really important, personally, to have that plate lifted up at the offertory and to bless the gifts that we've received. And if there's no plate, just the priest can raise their hands as the other elements arrive at the altar and say, we give thanks for all the gifts that have been received. So if you're not touching the plate, don't make the priest touch the plate either, but acknowledge in that moment at the altar that many gifts have been received, and that's another visual cue. We are people of liturgy. We like to see that.
Helen, when you put the plate back in the back on the pedestal, are you salting the plate so that people will see some money in there and know that's where they're supposed to put it?
I don't honestly know, but there seems to always be. I don't know whose $20 bill it is, but it's in there. And that's a good question.
Yeah.
I'll try to find that out. But I like to think of myself as very frugal, except when it comes to the church. When I have something like a check to mail in for our annual picnic, I put it in an envelope and put that in the plate. I mean, think of the stamp I'm saving here. Every little bit counts when you get to be my age.
Yeah.
But so there's, even if it's my humble envelope occasionally, there's something in it. But actually, members of the congregation have said, why don't we pass the plate?
So maybe it's an indication they're ready for it again.
I would think so.
Yeah, sounds like it. And I love that idea of maybe salting the
Oh,
plate.
for sure. For all I know, it's the rector's $20 bill in there Sunday after Sunday.
Earlier in my life, I spent a summer playing piano at a golf club on weekends, and I always salted the tip jar. Had to put
Of
my
course.
money in first before anyone else would. Uh, so that's a little window into my past. What else can I answer or can we talk about? Your questions are great, by the way. Thank you for this. Yeah, Helen.
We have had good luck too with testimonials. And I sent out an email this past week or the week before. Our Sunday school, which kind of sagged in the pandemic, and has sagged because frankly, we're short on young families, but that is changing. And so I made sure it went to the parents who have stepped up to do the Godly Play program. I mean, they're the ones with the kids. And I asked them to talk about it. Why are you doing this? And we've had some humorous testimonials and some very touching. And afterwards, people have said that was wonderful. I didn't realize they've been coming for so long. I didn't realize that. So I encourage you to, and if you only have a couple people per Sunday, that's okay too.
Yeah.
Than to have nothing.
Agreed. Stories are what it's about, and as you say, they're emotional. They can be funny, but they can be touching, and we connect with them, right? Oh, I can do this because this person I see every Sunday is making their gift or is supporting the ministry, or this is what it matters to them. Kathy asks, when are the testimonials typically given? I've seen them happen at different times, but most successfully right before the offertory at that. If you're a church that does your announcements between the peace and the offertory, then usually the last announcement before the offertory is a good time to do that testimonial. If you're a church that does your announcements at the end, before everybody is dismissed, then that's usually a good time to do it. But I like to put it right before the offertory, if possible. If your liturgists will allow that to happen, it's a really great time because it makes that connection between what's about to happen with the plate either being fixed or passed, and the gifts coming up to the altar, and the stories that we tell, because those are more gifts that we lay at the altar. It's our experience of our ministry, our love that we have for the community. Those are our gifts too. And Kathy asked, are they given from the floor, for the lectern, or the altar? Wherever people can be heard best.
In my message, I said, however you want to do it. Standing in your pew or up at the lectern, we'll listen.
Yeah.
So give people a choice.
Some churches have sound amplification, so you need to go up to where there's a microphone. Some churches, people stand out in the aisle or where they're at, and sometimes they come up to the front. Whatever makes sense in your community, Kathy, is, and wherever people can be heard best. It's a bummer, especially not all of us have voices that project. So, if you can't hear the testimonial, it's not being heard then, right? People are missing out on it. So make sure it happens in a way that it can be communicated. Also, writing them and putting them in your newsletter, videoing them and including a link. Those are great ways also to tell stories. It doesn't just have to be on Sundays. We can do it as a part of our communication strategy. Your questions are wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we are approaching the end of our time together, and I realize that maybe you have other things to do on your Saturdays besides talk with me. I really appreciate you being here today. We had a number of people sign up who didn't show up, but that's usual for a webinar. We'll send you all the materials. And for those of you who attended our April training and it took me a month to send out the materials, I'm so sorry. We had a glitch here at TENS, but we're all better now. And so these materials will come out right away. So I really appreciate you and your being here and your questions and your answers. You all are the reason we do this work. So I'll send you a link with more webinars you can sign up for as we go through the year, and look forward to catching up with you soon. Continued Easter blessings, and thank you for the beautiful work that you do in the church. Thank you so much. Marie, I'll get you April's webinar. I'll send that to you. Thanks, friends. Have a good day.
Thank you, Davy.